A ring of 23 coral islands in the Pacific Ocean surrounding a protected lagoon, Bikini Atoll is located between Hawaii and Australia, 4,000 miles off the west coast of the United States. Bikini, the largest of these islands, at under 600 acres, is smaller than New York's Central Park. A visit to Bikini Atoll is a visit to a tropical paradise, or at least so it seems. Bikini's teeming natural life belies its ominous past. These sunken ships of war are the few signs that this Pacific paradise was once a testing ground for the military's most awesome weapons. Just after the end of World War II, the U.S. Navy plans a series of nuclear tests. An unlikely fleet, including captured enemy warships and several well-known U.S. vessels, is brought to Bikini Lagoon. Among them is the U.S. Navy's own beloved aircraft carrier, the USS Saratoga. These ships will serve as targets for a series of unprecedented atomic bomb tests. Might help shed some light. The U.S. forces have been fighting the war in the Pacific for 4 grueling years, ever since the attack on Pearl Harbor. With the Japanese beaten back to their homeland, President Truman decides to avert a prolonged Allied invasion by dropping the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. One out of every 5 people in Hiroshima dies instantly. Tens of thousands more suffer the effects of the blast and the resulting radiation.
Smoke rose 50,000 feet as an explosion equal to 20,000 tons of TNT brought the greatest man-made disaster in the history of the world.
Still, the Japanese refuse to surrender. 3 days later, Truman orders a second atomic weapon dropped on Nagasaki. These bombs, never before used on civilians, split the atom to produce explosions so huge and damaging, they are thought to be the ultimate weapons of war. The war to end all wars ends at last.
Washington is jubilant, and in Chicago, more than 1 million sing and dance in the streets in the biggest celebration the Windy City has ever seen. Joy is unconfined.
With the relief of victory still fresh, scientists find it impossible to resist the impulse to examine this new and terrifying weapon more closely. Just a few weeks after Japan surrenders, plans for atomic bomb tests are set in motion. It is to be called Operation Crossroads. In this brave new world of Cold War politics, Operation Crossroads is more than just a series of tests conducted in the name of science. It would also serve to send a clear message to our new enemy, the Soviet Union.
On remote Bikini Atoll in the Central Pacific, preparations are speeded for America's test of the atom bomb against ships of war.
The main goal of the operation is to test the effect of the bomb on a naval fleet. But the test is also meant to shock the Russians with the full frightening capacity of this new weapon. The test has to meet a very specific set of requirements. First, it has to be an area controlled by the United States.
Factor number two, you needed either a lagoon or some other sheltered area where you could put the ships in a somewhat calm and stable environment. These are the different approaches. This is an old Navy.
Atomic history expert Jonathan Weisgall has spent years studying Operation Crossroads.
Another factor was being within a couple 100 miles, no more, of the range of a B-29 because the first drop was going to be an airdrop. And the fourth factor was an area that was either uninhabited or that had a very small population that could be relocated. In the wonderful words of the official history of Operation Crossroads, Bikini won out.
The United States Navy, under the leadership of Vice Admiral Spike Blandy, begins to mount an elaborate series of tests. He calls it Operation Crossroads because he believes the nuclear tests would define mankind's future.
The curtain rises on the greatest military experiment ever undertaken, the atom bomb tests at Bikini. The battleship Pennsylvania drops anchor in the lagoon.
Crossroads, scene 24, take 2.
Before the tests begin, the Bikini people agree to leave their island homeland. And they do so again and again for the newsreel cameras.
All right now, James, will you tell them that the United States government now wants to turn this great destructive force into something good for mankind?
Crossroads, scene 25, take 1.
There were, dozens of cameramen that covered the move of the Bikinians, and everything was, it was staged sadness would probably be the best way to describe it. I mean, people taking all their belongings, no one really appreciating the fact that these people were leaving their homeland.
All 167 Bikinians pack up everything they own, including the outrigger canoes that brought them to Bikini in the first place, and are relocated to another atoll 110 miles away. As preparations get underway for the first test, codenamed Able, the stars of the show begin to arrive. The Navy assembles a huge fleet from all across the Pacific. American vessels are set at anchor in Bikini Lagoon alongside enemy ships captured from the Japanese and even the Germans, all destined to be sunk together in the atomic blasts. The Nagato is the flagship of the Japanese fleet. It is from her bridge on December 7, 1941, that Japanese Admiral Yamamoto receives the infamous code words, Tora, Tora, Tora. This is the signal that launches Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. 2,400 American servicemen lose their lives in a single day. 12 ships and 164 aircraft in the U.S. fleet are also lost. Only 4 years later, the Nagato, a powerful icon of enemy aggression, is prepared as a target of nuclear destruction. Technicians place hundreds of samples of metals and fabrics aboard the ships to reveal the effects of atomic power. Photographers prepare more than 700 still and motion picture cameras to record the blast. But the larger experiment at Operation Crossroads is to test atomic weapons on the ships themselves. For the first test, codenamed Able, the battleship Nevada is to be ground zero. The battleship Nagato is anchored nearby.
Finally, Blandy says this is it. Crews of the target vessels abandon ship with their gear. The men are checked and double-checked to make sure that no one remains aboard. Originally, there were 35,000 crew members on all the ships. It's the end of months of preparation on the Atoll fleet.
My ship, which was later to become a target ship, was the USS Banner APA-60, a small attack transport. We could normally carry 1,200 troops with their equipment.
One of the sailors who witnessed the first blast is Ira McCanns. McCanns was just 18 when he enlisted in the Navy in 1945. A little over a year later, he would be witness to an atomic blast, the testing of a bomb identical to the one that destroyed Hiroshima.
When we left our ship, we were transferred to the Thomas Jefferson, which was a converted luxury liner. It was a troop ship, and we were 25 miles away from the able blast.
With the target ships evacuated, a nuclear fission weapon is wheeled to the B-29, Dave's dream, and loaded into position.
The Bombardier's supreme test is at hand as the bomb bay doors open.
Many of those on observer ships don eye protection in anticipation of the expected blast. Sailors on deck shield their eyes with their arms as the atomic weapon is dropped on Bikini Lagoon. Observers are kept at least 9 miles away from ground zero. All they see is the mushroom cloud looming over the horizon.
It was not as impressive as people thought it would be. I think they expected more damage, more blast damage, which they didn't get.
The bomber crew misses the target by almost half a mile. The battleships Nevada and Nagato remain afloat, virtually unharmed.
There was some fire damage, and we went aboard back aboard my ship and lived aboard it for 3 weeks. And it was one of the target ships.
Joining the Nagato as one of the target ships is the aircraft carrier USS Saratoga. She is hands down the sentimental favorite of all the ships brought to Bikini to be sacrificed in the name of science.
Originally, the Navy was going to use the aircraft carrier USS Ranger, but the decision ultimately was made to send the Saratoga out. I think it was because she was unique. She was the sole survivor of all of the Navy's old first-generation aircraft carriers. As well, she'd been damaged during the war. She'd taken 2 torpedoes, she'd taken 5 kamikazes, meant that she could take a tremendous punch, show the effects of a bomb, but hopefully stay afloat so that they could evaluate it.
At the time of her launch at Camden, New Jersey in 1920, the Lady Sarah at 880 feet is the Navy's largest ship. Heavily built of steel and wood, she contains more than 1,000 individual watertight compartments. She is virtually unsinkable. The Saratoga is billed as the largest and fastest craft of its kind in the world. Lady Sarah earns her reputation when her pilots fly missions over Wake Island, Guadalcanal, and raids on the Japanese home islands. It's during the Battle of Iwo Jima in February 1945 that the Lady Sarah comes under attack from a squadron of kamikaze aircraft.
Only 1 out of 10 kamikazes penetrates outer Navy defenses. 1 out of hundreds reaches the core of the fleet, and few of those hit their targets. Veteran carrier Saratoga. Under intense fire, a low-flying kamikaze heads through the fleet straight for her. Fire rips through the Saratoga's hull.
the crash leaves a massive hole in the flight deck. 123 U.S. sailors lose their lives, along with the kamikaze pilot. But the Lady Sarah survives. A favorite among the U.S. sailors that served aboard her in World War II, the Saratoga remains a favorite today. 3 weeks after the disappointing airdrop named Able, scientists schedule a second test. A test in which the bomb will be detonated underwater. This time, massive destruction is guaranteed.
5 seconds to go, and...
From a fixed position 90 feet under the surface of the lagoon, the Baker blast was detonated near both the Saratoga and the Nagato. After the unimpressive Able blast, the U.S. military wants to make sure they didn't miss again.
The Baker shot, the second one, was completely different from Able. In fact, it was terrifying.
Tons of water alive with deadly rays.
The bomb was detonated underwater. A huge bubble and then a kind of a reverse Niagara Falls emerged from the lagoon with water and foam headed up, and then it went up about 10,000 feet and it all collapsed back down into the lagoon. Not just with falling water, but now foam and spray, creating what was called a base surge, going up several hundred feet like rolling fog, literally knocking over a destroyer, knocking over a ship, and then enshrouding the entire fleet.
It was terrifying when you look straight up in the air and see the mushroom cloud above you.
Ground zero for the Baker test is the center of the target fleet. Technicians suspend the 20-kiloton bomb from a ship, tethering it 90 feet beneath its hull. Once detonated, a surface wave more than 90 feet high bursts over the fleet, enveloping both the Nagato and the Saratoga. A huge bubble of hot gas forms a hollow column about 2,000 feet wide and 5,000 feet high. A vast cloud of radioactive mist rolls over the lagoon at more than a mile a minute. Though it is virtually the same size as the Able bomb, detonating the Baker bomb underwater makes a huge difference in its impact.
So the concussive force of Baker pushed and hammered Saratoga, knocked her down, split her open, and after that it was inevitable that she'd go down.
They are losing a friend who'd seen them through many a battle. It's as much a memorial service as it is a weapons test.
And it just sunk beneath the waves, and that was the last we saw of it. A beautiful sight to see a ship like that go down straight, on an even keel, just as if it was made to do that.
Is the effect of radiation. After the terrifying explosion, it's still thought that nuclear radiation could be hosed off or scrubbed away. The frightening truth would take months to unfold.
We didn't know about fallout. And Baker actually proved to be extraordinarily destructive. No one really appreciated it at the time. But as scientists learned over time, every single one of the 95 target vessels was completely covered with huge doses of radioactive isotopes that made it impossible to salvage any of these ships.
After the dramatic conclusion of Operation Crossroads, radioactive contamination is a fact of life. Give Mother Nature enough time, and she will begin to heal herself. Trade winds and constant ocean currents tend to dissipate the effects of nuclear radiation. With time, sea life returns to the lagoon, and flocks of birds begin to nest in the trees. The tests that began in 1946 would go on for another 8 years, with a total of 25 nuclear weapons detonated in all. Today, the only obvious reminders are the bunkers that still stand vigil. 1954. Just as Bikini is showing real signs of recovery, comes the height of the Cold War.
Was recorded on element, our port of entry.
Scientists decide to demonstrate a new weapon, the nuclear fusion bomb. They call this new test Bravo.
When you fast forward to the 1950s, we're now talking about thermonuclear bombs, so-called hydrogen bombs. The Bravo shot at Bikini, March 1, 1954, was the equivalent of 1,000 Hiroshima bombs. Think of the devastation caused in Hiroshima, which is virtually unthinkable. Try to multiply the unthinkable by 1,000, and you're looking at the force of Bravo.
The Bravo blast remains the most powerful nuclear bomb ever detonated by the United States. The underwater Baker blast 8 years earlier dropped radioactive fallout, mostly in Bikini Lagoon. The Bravo thermonuclear test sends so much radiation so high into the sky that it is carried on the wind for hundreds of miles. As it falls out of the sky, the term fallout enters modern vernacular.
Bravo, if it had been set off in Washington, D.C., and if the winds had been coming from the southwest and headed to the northeast, would have effectively wiped out every citizen of Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and New York.
This horrific blast vaporizes an entire island. It leaves a crater more than a mile wide and 200 feet deep.